Okay, I've done segments before talking about how we might be able to solve the gun violence problem in the United States. And I've pointed out many times that gun violence is not going to be solved by one thing. And I've also pointed out, which by the way, some of the gun fetishists agree with me on this, that what has worked in other countries won't necessarily work in a vacuum in the United States. And the key word there is necessarily. And the explanation for why the United States needs unique solutions to the gun violence problem is that the United States has a unique problem in our culture with guns. And I've talked about this before, and it doesn't mean that I don't want an assault weapons ban. It doesn't mean that I don't want a ban on high capacity magazines. It doesn't mean that I think 100% background checks are a bad idea, or that we need better connections between our mental health system and the gun purchasing system. I think that in the US, we need all of those things. But what we need to understand, and this is barely ever discussed, is that we have a unique problem in the United States with guns that's different than in other countries. And the major problem in the United States with guns is what I guess we can loosely call gun fetishism, right? This includes the idea of guns as solutions to our problems. This applies to both school shooters and also to the gun obstructionists, I guess I'd call them, people who just want to get in the way of any common sense gun safety regulations under the guise of, oh, we need to never encroach upon the Second Amendment and we need full liberty and full freedom. They use that to justify obstructing any gun safety regulations or laws. Let's talk about background checks, right? Background checks alone are not going to solve that too many Americans consider guns a way to solve problems that can't be solved with guns. There are examples of other countries that have guns, but they have a healthier relationship to the guns, right? Switzerland is a popular one for the right. The American pro-gun right loves to talk about, hey, look, Switzerland, people have guns and there's no problems. Well, what's different in Switzerland is not only the laws about training, background checks, and how guns have to be stored, but the relationship between the citizens of Switzerland and their guns is totally different than in the United States. One that I'm more personally familiar with is Israel. In Israel, you see guns everywhere because there are soldiers everywhere, young kids doing their couple of years of mandatory service in the military. But the guns aren't seen as cool. The guns are seen as a tool that you learn to use when you do your service, but they're not fetishized. And the gun hobbyism, it exists, but it's not fetishized the way it is in the United States. And you see this difference in our relationship to guns because after 9/11, airline security was completely changed. We put air marshals on planes to try to stop hijackers. And yet we've had dozens of school shootings and no changes, mostly just bad ideas and some good ideas that the gun fetishist right just gets in the way of. So you can have a Second Amendment and still not think that we should champion people carrying guns everywhere and putting guns in more places, in movie theaters, in schools, in sporting events, in bars. Culturally, it has to be less acceptable to be carrying around a gun. And this is a cultural change that, aside from all the other changes that I think we should make, that's a cultural change that would drastically reduce the demand for guns. It would reduce the demand for gun stores. It would still be legal to have them. It would be tougher to get guns. It'd be less appealing and interesting. Guns should be scarce and expensive. And honestly, it's kind of late to really make this change in our culture easily because we have this sort of trigger happy gun culture in the US that in a lot of the world, Pat, when people hear about how some Americans fetishize guns, it's alarming. They see this and they say, what is wrong with these Americans that they're obsessed with their guns? So I think that, yes, the law can influence the culture to some degree, but the culture is a unique problem that we have here in the United States.
And it's because America has always had a gun culture, whether it be having the right to bear arms or exploring the new frontier or having all this land in the middle of the country.
Sure.
a lot of shooting and hunting goes on, and it will always go on, in part because we do have a constitutional right to bear arms. Doesn't mean you can't have restrictions on those, though.
And we're going to talk about that later because that's a key point. But yes, this is not saying let's get rid of the Second Amendment. It's saying we need to drastically change our relationship to guns. And think about seatbelts, right? Seatbelt laws were resisted heavily early on. Seatbelts were seen as uncool. Let the driver decide, freedom, liberty. But then it became a ticketable offense not to wear a seatbelt. And then car manufacturers added annoying dings when you don't wear your seatbelt. And people mostly wear seatbelt laws. Marijuana. Law does influence public perception. So the law around guns can help to change the culture, but there needs to be some bigger introspection here as well. Discuss this with us on our subreddit. Where am I wrong? Tell me where I'm wrong about this and the culture in the US around guns. davidpakman.com/Reddit. If you've been hearing about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and you want to get involved, maybe buy a little, but you just don't know how, Coinbase is for you. Coinbase is the world's most used way to buy, sell, and use Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and Bitcoin Cash. If you sign up through davidpakman.com/Coinbase and buy or transfer $100 worth of Bitcoin, you'll get a $10 bonus, and so will we. So you'll be supporting The David Pakman Show. Sign up today at davidpakman.com/Coinbase.